Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason is brought to you by Dick Van Dyke Appliance World and by Bob Brady Auto Mall.
They found out on Selection Sunday, a 7 seed facing Colorado in Austin, Texas. Welcome to Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Now, over the next hour, we'll be getting ready for the NCAA tournament and talking about Illinois' place in it. We'll take a look back at the highs and lows of the season, sit down with some Illini stars, and get you ready for that first-round matchup against the Buffaloes. That's a 3:40 Central Time tip-off on Friday. Now, if you joined us this football season, you know we've always gathered some of the top minds around Illini sports, and joining me right now to talk about all things Illinois basketball are Steve Kelly, radio host for Sports Talk 1400, Marcus Jackson, beat writer for the Champaign News-Gazette and columnist for the News-Gazette, Lauren Tate. Two-thirds of you have joined us this football season. Marcus, we thank you for your basketball expertise.
Well, I feel like I finally arrived, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, there we go. Well, of course, like I said, over the next hour, we'll talk about a lot of topics, but let's first just touch on the Illini, a 7 seed. You look at the RPI and the BPI. Those rankings might suggest Illinois would get a double-digit seed. They get a 7. So ranked a little bit higher than we thought they might. Steve, we'll start with you. Thoughts on Illinois' nice ranking there?
It is a good seed. They were looking at a no seed for a while at the beginning of the start of the Big Ten season when they went 2-7 out of the gate. They went on that nice winning streak there and got back in the conversation. And I think they moved off that 8-9 line last week at the Big Ten tournament with that win over Minnesota and a respectable game against Indiana.
Would you agree with that, Marcus? Maybe that win in the first round bumped them up a spot there.
I think so, because you look at Minnesota, that's a top 25 RPI team, so that probably bumped them up a line. And I think a lot of the fact that they're a 7 seed, it's a lot of respect shown to the Big Ten this season. It's been regarded as the best conference in the country, and it's a grueling schedule. And the fact that they're able to do what they did in that conference season kind of justified their seed.
Right.
Interesting that there's a number 28 pick by the selection committee as opposed to the fact they didn't get any votes in the top 25. But I think when you come right down to it, if you take the 15 through 40, there isn't much difference between any of them.
Right, I think so, and I think in this tournament field more than any other, there's going to be a whole lot of unknowns as we get going here. Now, were there any surprises on Selection Sunday? We all kind of saw it together as we were waiting to talk to the team on Sunday. Any surprises from you? Not
any major surprises. I think you might look at some of the seeds in particular, and somebody might be a little lower than you thought they might be going in. Oregon comes to mind. They're a 12 seed after winning their postseason tournament. That might be one. And if you look a little closer, there's probably a couple other ones. You got anything like that?
Well, I think the biggest surprise, not to me personally, but I think across the country when you watch some of these other shows and people talk about it, is the fact that Kentucky did not get in to the tournament, the defending national champion, kind of on the bubble right there. And a lot of people didn't think the committee would have the wherewithal to leave them out and do that. And they brought a team in like Middle Tennessee. And Lauren and I have talked about this, where you know which of those teams would you take if they were playing on a neutral court today. But the fact that Kentucky didn't get in was a bit of a shocker.
Yeah, I don't think it was a shock at all that Iowa didn't get in, but I would tell you that if Iowa was paired against Illinois or Minnesota in a game on a neutral court tomorrow, they'd probably be a slight favorite. I think that Iowa lost so many close games, and close games aren't recorded by the computers. If you lose, it's a loss. If you win, you know, it's 1.4 if you win on the road. It's 0.6 if you win at home. Nobody takes into account that the ball's in the air, the game's over, and the ball goes in, and you lose or you win. I mean, those games are so tight, and so I think Iowa, with a 9-9 record, better than Illinois and Minnesota in the Big Ten. Not a surprise, but I just think it's a tough situation for Iowa. They didn't play enough good games in November and December. To me, those games don't matter that much anyway.
Right. It's all about the madness in March, and we'll talk a lot about that as we come up throughout the show. But next, from Colgate to the finale at Ohio State and everywhere in between, remembering some of the big moments and some of the memorable quotes of the Illini regular season next. Hi, folks. Welcome back to Inside the Illini Road to the postseason ahead of Friday's game between Illinois and Colorado. Now, at varying points this season, the Illini were a top 10 contender. Then they found themselves flailing in their own conference. Then they became a giant killer. We'll look back at the entire roller coaster ride as we recap the 2012-2013 regular season. When he took the job, John Gross knew expectations weren't high.
There's always skeptics in everything in life, and if you don't have thick skin in this profession, you're in trouble.
A first-year coach and a team that went 17-15. 12 of those losses coming in the final 14 games. But an off-season slogan, toughness and togetherness. Gross refused to talk about expectations, just the next game.
Someone asked me today, are you going to be able to play as fast as you want to play? I'm not sure yet.
The non-conference season had its ups and downs, but saw mostly success. First real shot of excitement, a DJ Richardson overtime buzzer beater in Hawaii. The Illini then rolled through the Maui Invitational Field and ran their season-opening record to 9-0, ahead of a date with number 10 Gonzaga. On the Bulldogs' home floor, Brandon Paul poured in 35 en route to a Conference Player of the Week honor and an 11-point win.
We haven't arrived yet. We've still got a bunch of things to work on.
The hot streak pushed them to 12-0 and a top 10 ranking, just in time for the bragging rights game. But in St. Louis, Mizzou cooled down the Illini. The Tigers won by 9. Illinois had their least efficient offensive night to date.
We don't allow one game to define us.
After a United Center win versus Auburn, the Illini wrapped up the non-conference slate 13-1. Then came that Big Ten season and about every miscue you could think of. Missing a defensive rebound on a late free throw at Purdue.
Some people learn by seeing, some people learn by listening, and some people learn by peeing on the electric fence.
Getting crushed in Madison.
Today we didn't have it.
A nice offensive effort at Michigan State, but a defensive letdown.
You know, our back's against the wall, so we just gotta, we gotta fight. We gotta, it's like we in a corner.
Then an all-around disappointment at home against Northwestern.
Our defense has been atrocious.
The Illini were 2-7, and on the outside looking in to the college basketball postseason. That is until February 7th, in a 3-minute stretch against number 1 Indiana. DJ Richardson's 8 unanswered points tied it up, and with 1.9 seconds left on the clock, Tyler Griffey executed the sneakiest game winner you might ever see. One shot, and suddenly the Illini reignited. The win sparked a 5-game winning streak, which included revenge over the Gophers, the Boilermakers, and the Wildcats. The Illini were back at 500 in the Big Ten season, and on the final home game of the year, it was Senior Day. An emotional day, an emotional win against Nebraska.
I was more happy emotional just to be able to get a win at the end of the day, and all the fans cheering for us. We have the greatest fans.
The season ended on 2 tough road games at Iowa and Ohio State, 2 teams that had only lost 3 combined at home all season. The Hawkeyes and Buckeyes held serve, and the Illini finished with an 8-10 conference record and the 8th seed going into the Big Ten tournament.
I think we just need to clear our minds right now and just get ready for Thursday and just go out and leave it out there.
And the Illini ended the regular season 21-11, and all things considered, that probably exceeded the expectations of most in Champaign-Urbana. We'll get our experts' take on that straight ahead.
Bald head. I don't know if I can do those lights. Hey, look, this is not going to be one of those sexy ones. He's a good athlete, but certainly not a helicopter. If little things didn't matter, then ask a guy who's in bed with a mosquito. You got Tigger and Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. Mike Shaw played like his head was held underwater. I don't do Eeyores. I do Tiggers. You ever read the book 112 Degrees? It's when water boils. A couple times I've asked the guys to go back to the locker room, have a conversation with themselves, and come back out as a Tigger. This isn't Biddy ball. You got to do it again, and then you got to do it again, and then you got to do it again. Then it's coming at you again, then it's coming at you again, then it's coming at you again. What do you want me to do, like hit somebody or strangle somebody? Or I don't have a lot of options. How you like your chances, John? I'd say not very good. My dad taught me one time, if you hit a wall and it hurts, don't run into it again. It's the old Bill Belichick. It's a Will Rogers quote. As Doc Rivers would say, Howard Garfinkel said, and I remember Phil Jackson's quote was, it's the old Mark Twain. You've heard me say it before. Some people learn by seeing, some people learn by listening, and some people learn by peeing on the electric fence. Thanks.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini, road to the postseason. Now, as you just saw there, never really a dull moment in a John Gross press conference, even at the low points in the season. It's still very entertaining for Illini fans, and like he said, if you don't think the little things count, just ask the guy who's in bed with a mosquito. One of the many great Grossisms, as I like to call him throughout the year. At the very least, a very likable coach when you got to talk to him.
He's really a lot of fun, and that's the thing that I took to him when he first got here is not only do you learn stuff when you talk to him, he can really fill your tape recorder, fill your notebook. There's always something there. And he quoted the Ohio University football coach, Frank Solich, several times during the season. There's other ones as well. Yeah, he's great. He's really thoughtful, very intelligent in a lot of the things he says. I know the Grossisms are fun. From that same press conference with the mosquito, I think he said something about when you pee on the electric fence.
You learn a couple different ways. One of them, you pee on the electric fence.
And another one was at Iowa, where they kept getting their shots blocked. He said, "My dad told me when you run into a brick wall and it hurts, don't do it again." Things like that. He's got a way with words, and it's always entertaining, like you said, Matt.
I think the key thing, though, is the way he treated the players. They kept missing and missing and missing, and he kept saying, keep shooting, keep shooting, keep shooting. And it's not easy to be positive when you're having, particularly that rut that the Illini got in when they started out the Big Ten season, the loss to Wisconsin, the loss to Northwestern. Those were blows, really set them back, and yet he came out positive afterwards, and I think that was a key to the season, because they had to turn it around, and you don't turn it around if you get down on yourself.
Right, and well, obviously the key, if he can be as charming as he wants to be, they don't win a bunch of ball games, then the fan base is not going to be very happy. He managed to do that, and you think about what last year's squad did, losing 12 of their last 14. Talk about his performance as a basketball coach and his ability to kind of get this team to believe in his system right off the bat.
That doesn't always happen when a new coach comes in. You don't always get the guys buying in right away, and maybe they didn't buy in right away. Maybe it took a little while that we don't know about. But he certainly got them to buy in. He got them to play hard. Are they the perfect guys for what he wants to do in the future? Probably not, but you have to adapt the system. I think most coaches, when they take over a new program, realize that the first year is about the players, not necessarily about the system.
Right.
I think he got that and stayed with it. Very positive guy, as you mentioned, very upbeat, very animated on the sidelines. He really gets into it. I like the way he talks to officials. I like the way he knows when to back off from talking to the officials as well.
I think the most impressive thing to me, I think this might be getting this team to the NCAA tournament. When you figure they lost 12 of 14 last year, they lost a 7-foot lottery pick, and Myers Leonard going to the draft. They don't have a real true point guard. Tracy Abrams and Brandon Paul have been playing the point for them, but those guys are those are scorers. I think this might be a more impressive job this year, what he did with Illinois, than he did last year with Ohio, going to the Sweet 16 with that group that he had together for a while.
And that was a good team he had with Ohio as well.
He overcame the inability to shoot consistently, and that I think the defense played a big part of that. And it was just a strong effort, and yet not too far from what we expected. I mean, 8-10 Big Ten record was maybe about what was predicted, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. And the big non-conference wins, though, I think Gonzaga was kind of you look back on it, and that's when you decide those games like that were what made it a success. Well, like we said, the Illini finished the regular season 21-11. Most had considered them a lock for the NCAA tournament, but a strong showing at the Big Ten tourney didn't hurt their path to the big dance. We'll recap last week's Big Ten action at the United Center next on Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Hello and welcome back to Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Well, the hype machine was in motion for the Big Ten tournament, the best tourney field in years. 4 teams ranked in the nation's top 10 when no other conference had more than 2. Meanwhile, the Illini went in as perhaps the most dangerous 8 seed in any conference tournament. We take you to the United Center for the week that was in the Big Ten tournament.
It's loaded, man. It's gonna be a rough 4 days, that's for sure.
Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State. Teams that just might be favored against any other team in the country on a neutral court, except each other.
Maybe as good a tournament top to bottom as we've had in a while.
But starting things off, an 8-9 matchup, Illinois and Minnesota. And as you might have expected, it was an even one for 2 teams who figured they were in, but a win would solidify that tournament berth. But a senior unwilling to bow out so easily, Brandon Paul put the Illini on his back, scoring 25 points, and in a tie ball game with seconds winding down, he gave us this.
Crosses over, 15-footer!
Some early fireworks in Chicago.
I've been in those situations before where, defense flooded to me. The buzzer ran down and I saw I had some space, so I let the shot go.
It set up a date with top-seeded Indiana the very next morning. Now remember, the last time the two met, the Illini toppled the #1 Hoosiers in Champaign. Friday, revenge was a dish best served Oladipo, The Indiana junior didn't have a spectacular game, but he put the exclamation point on it as Indiana went on for an 80-64 drubbing of Illinois.
I tell our guys all the time we're going to control the controllables, and that's our attitude and our effort and our ability to execute what we're supposed to do, and we'll let the rest take care of itself.
Indiana's run, though, didn't last long. Wisconsin notched a couple of the most impressive wins of the week. On the other side of the bracket, Ohio State running their winning streak to 7 games before the conference title showdown with the Badgers, and a game tied at 41 with 6 minutes left, but a 9-2 run by the Buckeyes, and Ohio State won the Big Ten tournament for the 4th time since 2007.
These guys have fought, these guys have competed from the day the season ended last year in New Orleans.
Well, as we saw there, Ohio State winning the Big Ten tournament championship. That's no small feat there, but of course, Wisconsin took care of a lot of the dirty work there by knocking out Indiana. An interesting tournament, and one where we saw the Illini get a pretty exciting win, started things off here.
Yeah, they got that last-second win. Brandon Paul jump shot at the buzzer to beat Minnesota in a game, as you might expect, in an 8-9 game, pretty evenly matched up game there. Paul, there was no doubt who was going to take it. He took it and flushed it home. That put the Illini against Indiana, where they didn't do quite so well. But you talk about, a lot of people call the Wisconsin win over Indiana an upset. Well, they've beaten them 12 times in a row. So
right.
They've got their number, Marcus.
Yeah, they really do, and it's just something about that style. And Bo Ryan kind of has Tom Crean's number at this point. But kind of back to Illinois a little bit, and I think the big thing for them was Brandon Paul having a big game. When no one else on the offense was able to really step up and do anything, he put the team on his shoulders, and that's what your best player is supposed to do, your most talented guy. For him to step up in a big moment like that, maybe we'll see that going forward here in the NCAA tournament. But for him to have a performance like that this late in the season, it kind of speaks volumes about where he is right now.
And for the 4th time, Illinois won on the last shot, and that's really important when you're trying to win basketball games. I mean, if you can win close games, it changes the whole outlook. So I think that we've got to remember that, the Hawaii game, they didn't play that good, but it came from 16 down and won it on a last shot by DJ. We know that Griffey did it twice, including against Indiana, and now Paul. Those are huge.
I think what we saw from Illinois during the tournament was kind of almost a microcosm of their season. Starting off hot, a big-time lull there in the second half against Minnesota. This is a team of some pretty intense streaks, and a lot of times hasn't been in a good way for them. What do they have to do to kind of buck that trend?
Well, it always, as Lauren likes to say, it always goes back to shooting, and they were a pretty good shooting team when they went 13-1 through the non-conference. That fell off in the Big Ten for many reasons. Coaches know the other Big Ten teams so well, but they're really not a great shooting team at this point in the game. I think you got to figure that out. They're not. Can they shoot better? Yes. Maybe there's a game, Marcus, where they get hot.
I think the key for them is when they're struggling offensively and they're not making shots is to continue to defend. In the Minnesota game, they weren't making a whole lot of shots collectively, but Minnesota only scored 49 points in that game, and that's what gave them a chance to win the game. So if they continue to bring that kind of effort on the defensive end, gives themselves a chance to win late in the game. They've got the confidence, like Lauren said, they've done it 4 times this year where they can make shots at the end of games or pull things out, then they'll give themselves a chance.
Marcus, I want to ask you, I keep asking you this question, can Illinois shoot better when they get away? Might they shoot better getting out of the Big Ten where everybody knows them, everybody scouted them for 2 years in a row? This is the same team virtually with the exception of Myers Leonard. Everybody knows them in the Big Ten.
Well, when they were really hot early in the season and making 11 three-pointers a game and leading the country, it was in the non-conference portion of the schedule where teams didn't know you so well. So maybe that's what's going to happen here in the NCAA tournament. They get an unfamiliar opponent, they get hot against those guys, and then we'll see what happens.
Fresh start could make a big difference.
Yeah, and we'll see, and we'll talk about the bracket a little more in depth next, because we all know why we're here. It's because of this thing. Everybody gets to fill out a bracket. We'll talk about the Big Ten teams in the tournament and who might have the easiest path to the Final Four next on Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Welcome back to the studios at WA&D for Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Now, it was a huge year in the Big Ten. They had the preseason #1, and it doesn't hurt when just about every college basketball analyst calls it the best conference in the country constantly. In the end, the conference rewarded with 7 bids as WA&D's Noah Newman gives us a look at where the Big Ten ended up in your bracket.
Much like the SEC in football, the Big Ten enters postseason play with very high expectations. 7 teams from the conference are going dancing, and all of them are favored to win their first games. That includes 11-seed Minnesota over 6-seed UCLA, a trendy upset pick. And you got to give credit to their head coach, Tubby Smith, who was pretty accurate in his preseason prediction.
I think you'll see more teams than we've ever had in the NCAA tournament.
Joining Tubby and company in the South bracket is Michigan, a team that's really struggled down the stretch. They've played only 500 balls since February, and they'll have their hands full with South Dakota State, led by Nate the Great Walters. He's the nation's 4th leading scorer.
It up, got it to go off balance. He was looking for the foul.
First 4, we got to get it. Final 3. 1, 2, 3, run.
Out west, we could potentially see a rematch of the Big Ten championship game. 5-seed Wisconsin and 2-seed Ohio State could meet in the Elite Eight in Los Angeles. But first things first, the Badgers have to get past SEC champs Ole Miss in their first game, and the Buckeyes have to avoid a letdown in nearby Dayton, Ohio against Iona.
Tom, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the strength of the league this year. 3 teams in the top 5.
Yeah, I knew somebody would ask that. Why ruin a good day?
Tom Izzo knew before the season started it would be a brutal year in the Big Ten, and he's ready to play teams outside the conference. Last week, he actually said he'd even play the Lakers. Be careful what you wish for, Tom. Your Spartans have landed in the toughest region out there, the Midwest. If Sparty wants to get back to the Final Four, they'll have to survive a bracket that features Louisville and Duke.
It's been a long time, long, hard process to get a program back that's considered one of the best in the country.
The team most likely to represent the Big Ten in Atlanta has to be the Indiana Hoosiers. They're the #1 seed in the East. And if all the stars align for this former geometry teacher from Danville, Indiana, his team could be facing them in the Elite Eight. Hey, you never know. That's why they call it March Madness.
Okay, guys, and when we look at the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament, you got a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 7, and an 11. They're taking up a whole lot of space in everybody's bracket, and they're fairly evenly distributed in each of the regions. Which one do you think might have the best road, we'll say, to the Final Four?
I will go with Ohio State as a 2 seed. The way they're playing, we probably could have made a case for a 1 seed the way they've they wrapped up the season and won the Big Ten tournament. They're out west. They've got some decent competition there, but I think they have the best chance to get to the Final Four.
I like Ohio State, like you said, Steve, but I also like Indiana and their route. I think there was some disappointment from the Hoosier fans not getting to play in Indy in the second weekend of the tournament, but also not getting the #1 overall seed. But if you look at the #1 seeds, particularly Louisville in the Midwest, which is loaded, I think Indiana's got a pretty good path there. They've got a good chance to go far and make a run here in the tournament late.
I agree with you, Marcus. I think Indiana is a team that could go far. I like their early schedule. The problem that I see is when they get to D.C. in the round of 8, they're going to probably have to play, assuming Illinois doesn't get there, they're probably going to have to play a really good Miami team, which is a conflicting opponents because you got the great mystique of Indiana, and you got Miami, which is in trouble with the NCAA. They're not a basketball school. They haven't done well in the NCAA tournament, but still, I think Miami is really loaded, and I would think that Miami could stop Indiana at the round of 8.
I also like a potential matchup in what's now the 3rd round between Wisconsin and Kansas State, the 5 and 4 seeds there. Bo Ryan against Bruce Weber. Those guys know each other pretty well. They go way back. That should be a fun game to watch. Contrasting styles. I think Kansas State likes to get up and down and run a little bit, and we all know what Wisconsin likes to do.
I think that West region is interesting because Steve and Marcus, you guys both mentioned Ohio State because the 1 seed in there is Gonzaga, 3 seed New Mexico, 4 seed Kansas State. Ohio State probably looks at all 3 of those teams and goes, hey, I think we're better than them. And so I agree in that I think they'll have a good route to that point. Now, what I look at is a 4 seed in Michigan. I think Michigan's got to be the best 4 seed in that tournament. There's a second round matchup potentially with Kansas. I think if they could get through that, that could be a dangerous team because up until Michigan lost to Penn State, I had a lot of faith in the Wolverines as a team I might put pretty far in this bracket. But of course, the Big Ten season happened to them, and it turned out to be a little more interesting than we thought.
And last year, Michigan lost to Ohio.
Right.
Coached by John Gross in the NCAA tournament. This year they play South Dakota State, coached by a former Champaign Centennial athlete, Scott Nagy. Could be an interesting first-round game for them.
And I watching the selection show, I think we had discussed this before we actually started the show. We have a UCLA versus Minnesota 6-11 matchup. You think UCLA would be favored, but a lot of love for the Big Ten on the show, at the very least.
Yeah, it is, and we've seen what Minnesota was capable of doing early in the season. They were in the top 10 in the country, 15-1, I think, at one point. They came here and beat Illinois, kind of routed that game, went to Indiana on the road and took those guys down to the wire there late. So Minnesota's capable of doing some things. It's just a matter of them getting that confidence back to where they were early in the season.
Minnesota beat Indiana the last time they played, too.
That's right.
Anything can happen. That's why it's madness. Plenty more bracket coverage, speaking of, coming your way next. And it's the thing that puts the madness in March, the upsets. We'll talk about which high seeds may be making early exits and which double-digit seeds have the best chance of making the Sweet 16. You're watching Inside the Illini, Road to the Postseason. And welcome back to Inside the Illini, Road to the Postseason, digging a little more into that NCAA tournament bracket. We act like we're experts, but in the end, we're just going to miss as many as anybody else. We'll take a look at the bracket here. We normally did picks during the football season. I say we do some picks that have to do with some big upsets, because every year there's a 12-5 or a 13-4 where something happens. And so we're each going to make a pick, and I'll go ahead and start the one I'm really interested in watching, and this is a team who we just saw beat Indiana, Wisconsin, a 5-seed taking on a 12-seed Ole Miss. I think this is going to be a big topic through all of our picks, but momentum is such a big thing, and like it was with UConn in 2011, they were the 9 seed in the Big East tournament. You get on that momentum, you win the conference tournament, anything could happen, and they of course won the national championship that year. I don't think Ole Miss is going to win the national championship, but I think they have just enough momentum where they're going to be a tough team for Wisconsin to beat, a team that got stopped in the Big Ten championship there. So I'm going to pick, and I'll write it in my bracket just to be fair, Ole Miss over Wisconsin.
I want to look at a couple of games in the Midwest. Number 12, Oregon, against number 5, Oklahoma State. I think Oregon might have got shortchanged a little bit on the seeding there. They've got a little something extra to play for after doing well in the Pac-12. Another game in that same region, I think it could be very interesting, is Michigan State. Don't sleep on them because they're playing pretty well, and this is their time of year. But Valparaiso at 14 is a very disciplined team. They're the most experienced team as far as number of guys that have played college basketball in the country. So they may not get rattled by Michigan State and may give Tom Izzo and the Spartans a good game.
Another Illini connection with Valpo is Roger Powell is on that coaching staff there too, so they've got that going for them. There's a couple games I looked at. We talked about Minnesota, UCLA. If Minnesota can play up to capabilities, I think Minnesota's got a chance to pull the upset there. But another one, you know, Butler's always the team pulling upsets here and sneaking up on people. They're the 6th seed. They're playing Bucknell. We know what Bucknell's capable of doing. Beat Bill Self a couple years ago in the tournament, and they're kind of I think Bucknell's at a level right now where they're trying to get to where Butler is. You know, that's where Butler was a few years ago, and Butler doesn't have, you know, the dynamic offensive players like they had in the past with Gordon Hayward and Shevlin Mack, those guys who could kind of take over and play off one another. The guy Rodney Clark, but you take him out of that, they don't have a whole lot of other guys who can score, particularly on the perimeter. So it's a good matchup. Butler's not playing particularly well right now. Kind of struggled there down the stretch in the A-10, so that's one to watch, I think, too. You know, Butler and Virginia Commonwealth have been the teams that everybody has watched for the last several years. But I think maybe Akron could shock VCU. And the reason I say that is St. Louis did the job on them, and Akron played really well in the second half against Ohio to bump the Ohio team that was the leftover team that John Gross left. And I just think that there's something about Akron. They had a terrific year, and I think everybody was expecting them to do well until they lost their best player. Now I think that they've shown that they can win without him.
And speaking of Ohio, every year there's some double-digit seed that makes it to the Sweet 16. Keep the question simple. Who's that going to be this year?
Well, you caught me off guard with that one.
It's a tough question, and you know, it's especially with the 12-5 seeds. You know, that's a high seed to
Well, I'll tell you who I'd like to see get it. Lon Kruger with Oklahoma. They're at 10.
Right.
I know a lot of people are calling for Colorado to beat Illinois in that first round and then have a favorable matchup maybe in the second round with Miami and get by them and have a 10 seed in the Sweet 16 there. That could be one to watch out for too.
You can always look at
studying.
Yeah, you can always look at the 8-9 games because those are usually pretty competitive games, and really whoever wins that is not an upset. But it'll be fun to watch, and that's why they play the games.
I think Oregon might be one of those teams that could sneak in there, higher than their 12 seed. Well, coming up, we're going to turn the page back to the Illini. We've all been calling it a roller coaster season. It's really been a roller coaster career for a group of Illini seniors. We'll look back at the ups and downs of their 4 years in orange and blue next on Inside the Illini Road to Postseason. Welcome back, folks, to Inside the Illini, Road to the Postseason for the Illinois senior class. It isn't the first NCAA tournament of their careers, but they've been through some extremes throughout their time on campus. We look back on their time as Illini and what it means to end their careers in the big dance. It's a farewell to a class of Illini seniors that have seen plenty. An NIT, an NCAA tournament berth, and a win in the tourney. A year without a postseason that immediately followed. Now the return to the big dance. A perfect swan song for the likes of DJ Richardson, Brandon Paul, and Tyler Griffey.
We have a lot of people just disregarding us, kind of putting us to the side, and we had a lot of things to prove, and I felt like we stepped up in those occasions.
That trio has been there through it all. Coaching change, the departure of NBA talent, long losing streaks, double-digit winning streaks, each of them their own buzzer-beating game winners, and all of them essential cogs this year's NCAA run.
I thought the hardest part for them, and that's why I'm most proud of them, was getting through that stretch where, maybe people were saying, hey, here they go again. And they fought. Obviously proved over the last 11 games that this was a different, situation.
On this year's senior night, they bid goodbye along with Sam McLaurin, who joined the roster just this year, and Kevin Berardini, who saw just 32 minutes of floor time in his 3 years with the Illini. But it was Paul, Richardson, and Griffey who were leaned on all year for a new coach trying to put in a new system.
We battled through some ups and downs, and really fought through some tough times.
Even through Griffey's 0-for 20-something three-point shooting slump, broken here in that win over Indiana.
I've gotten a lot of shots up between when I started missing until now, so much that my wrist has been hurt.
Through criticism of Paul's consistency, yet his ability to show up in big moments. And through questions during Richardson's apparent decline his sophomore and junior year, only to prove in the end he was the emotional glue when the team appeared ready to fall apart.
Coach Gross called me, just kept telling me to stay on these guys. I got to be the most vocal leader on the team.
I meant what I said earlier when he wasn't shooting well. I'm going to say it again. I ain't trading him for anybody.
And just look where Paul and Richardson stack up in the Illini record books. Paul has the third highest single-game point total in school history, a 43-point effort against Ohio State. He'll go into the tournament 9th all-time in scoring and three-pointers. Richardson is 3rd all-time for the Illini in threes, and both have appeared in 136 games in orange and blue. That's 3 off the school record. One of the most experienced squads in the NCAA tournament field. Feels good about what they've accomplished already.
I think it's a blessing. Just, basketball takes you so many places, and it's taken, me personally all around the world, and it's, I thank God for it every day.
Well, guys, like we said, they've had some ups and downs. This team has provided a lot of excitement lately. We talked about the game-winning shots that have happened this year that have come from that team. Tyler Griffey, Brandon Paul, and DJ Richardson, each with some big buzzer beaters this year. You guys have been here for their entire careers. Talk about how you've seen this group grow.
I think they've grown quite a bit. And one thing that stands out to me is one guy, and that's DJ Richardson. The first day I met him when he came in from Peoria, he had a firm handshake. He looked you in the eye. He was a very nice kid, and he didn't change really over the years. Very personable, very tough guy. I think he's kind of recreated his career. He had a great freshman year, and he slumped a little bit the last couple of years, but has just kind of been what John Gross likes to call resilient, and all 4 of those guys really have.
Yeah, and the thing that stands out to me about these guys as a group is that they're just a bunch of really good kids. You touched on DJ being a great kid, but all of them, when you get to talk to them, Brandon Paul is a really good kid. You sit down and talk to him. They've never been in any trouble off the court. They're good students. Brandon Paul's an academic, all Big Ten guy. Tyler Griffey, a fantastic kid, really sharp kid. Sit down and have some pretty interesting conversations with him too. So that's the thing that stands out to me the most. I think they've all grown in different areas of physically on the basketball court, but I think that's the thing that stands out most to me is just the way they carry themselves and how they represent their university.
I'm always interested in people saying, well, wait till John Gross gets his players here. Well, I will tell you that the 4 seniors he's going to lose, and this includes Sam McLaurin, they've made more points in the Big Ten and in the season than any other Big Ten group of seniors. Now, Indiana might lose more players ultimately through the NBA draft, but I'm just saying, as it stands as seniors, nobody's losing this many points.
Right, and he inherited a good group, and I like your point, Marcus, about the fact that there hasn't been any trouble, and you take that for granted a little bit when you're dealing with some college kids who might feel a little entitled. They get on a college campus, they're the stars, they just beat Indiana, but of course the signal has been this. DJ Richardson has employed that quite
I think
a bit.
some people forget about that too when there's a bad game or they don't shoot well or he makes a boneheaded play and they jump all over these guys, and just remembering that they're 20, 21, 22-year-old guys and they're going through some things in their lives as well.
You know, they went through that last year when they lost 12 out of 14. They were really down, and the coach got fired, and everybody was in, you know, just nobody could hold their head up hardly. And they came back, and when they had that slump this year, they were able to come back from it, which they didn't a year ago.
Right.
That's to their credit.
You know, something else that doesn't always work is transfers.
Yeah.
And in this case, with Sam McLaurin being the graduate school one-year transfer, I think he fit right in. I think he brought some maturity to this bunch that was already mature, but I think he was a key guy.
And he's a key guy in this game. I think when you play Colorado, you realize Roberson is the guy you got to stop, and that's the guy that's going to be guarding me, I think.
Right, you can't overstate Sam McLaurin's presence in the underneath the hoop there. Well, coming up next, we'll wrap up the show looking at Illinois' first-round matchup. We'll scout the Colorado Buffaloes and take a look at the keys to an Illini victory. That's next on Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. A road to the postseason, a road that took us to a first-round NCAA matchup between Illinois and Colorado. The last time they met, it was Lou Henson's 1987 Illini, winning 86-68 in Denver. Now, none on the current Illini roster were even born yet, but to learn a whole lot more about these Buffaloes, our Noah Newman looks at the Pac-12's fifth-place finisher, Colorado.
For the first time in 50 years, the Colorado Buffaloes have made the NCAA tournament in back-to-back seasons. And like the Illini, their journey hit some major speed bumps along the way. They lost 4 of their first 5 in conference play, just like Illinois did, but they finished strong by winning 9 of their final 13 to lock up a 10 seed in the East.
There's a lot of emotions running through me right now, you know, just real happy, you know, and especially going back home to Austin, Texas. So.
That's Andre Roberson, the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. He averages 10 points and 11 rebounds per game. He'll cause some major problems inside, but he's not the only guy Illinois has to worry about. The Buffaloes feature a well-rounded offensive attack, and it all runs through their leading scorer, Spencer Dinwiddie, a 6'6" all-conference first-teamer capable of taking over any game.
They're well-balanced. You know, they have 5 guys that average between 9 points per game and double figures. They're great at getting to the foul line, so obviously we're going to have to play hard without fouling.
The Buffaloes were in a similar spot last year when they upset 6th seed UNLV in the second round. To pull off another upset this time around, head coach Tad Boyle knows they'll have to do what Minnesota couldn't do last week, stop Brandon Paul.
Well, Illinois is battle-tested, I can tell you that. Brandon Paul is a heck of a player, one of the top players in the country. But it should be a heck of a matchup for us.
I do know they have a really good kid on the team, a guard named Paul. So other than that, I don't really know anything about him, but we're looking forward to getting to know them well.
60th in rebounds a game, 5th in the Pac-12 overall. A middle-of-the-road team for a Pac-12 conference that, I don't know if underrated is the right word, but not rated very highly.
Well, for the first time in more than 50 years, Colorado is in the NCAA tournament in back-to-back years. That hasn't happened for quite a while, obviously, and Tad Boyle trying to get that culture back. One of the big guys for Illini fans to watch in this game is Andre Roberson. He's averaging a double-double, 11 boards, 11 points a game, Marcus.
Yeah, he's going to be a tough matchup for those guys, and we touched on Sam McLaurin a little bit earlier in some of the segments, and he's going to have to come up big, down low, keep that guy off the boards along with some of the other guys, too. And you got a guy like that, you get some second opportunities to score. That's what's going to hurt Illinois a little bit. So I think they got to keep him off the boards and kind of control those guards. They got a couple guys in Chen and Dinwiddie who can make some things happen. So I think Illinois is going to have its hands full, but I think at the same time, they've been in some pretty big games, played some pretty good competition. They're going to be up for the matchup.
I think these are similar teams. I think that both of them concentrate heavily on defense. I think that the rebounding is going to be crucial. This is a good rebounding Colorado team, probably has carried them as much as anything. And remember this, Illinois has only won 1 NCAA game in 6 years. They beat UNLV a couple years ago, and in that particular game, Brandon Paul had 8 rebounds and 8 points, and he wasn't a big factor in it, but 8 points and 8 rebounds counts. And that was a game Mike Davis and Dimitri McCamey were the stars. But just to get back in the tournament, these guys have been there, the seniors have been there, And of course, McLaurin is there for the first time, which is what he came here for.
I think it can't be overstated. John Gross's experience in the NCAA tournament. Took Ohio there a couple years ago. Last year, getting a 13th seed into the Sweet 16, a couple free throws away really from the Elite Eight against North Carolina, and that overtime loss there too. So he's going to have these guys ready. He knows what it takes, and he's got a method to this, and they trust what he's been able to do. So I think that's going to go a long way as well.
And that raises an interesting point because Coach Gross talks about, oh, we're not going to change a thing. He said that with emphatically on Sunday. We're not changing a thing, but there is a difference to playing in the NCAA tournament. What's the Gross factor here? How is he going to affect this team in a situation like this?
Well, he went on a nice run last year, as we mentioned, at Ohio University. He's been there. These guys, as Lauren mentioned, some of the guys have played. It's been a while. They watched it all last year, but I think Gross knows what to expect, and he knows how to get the guys to anticipate what might be ahead.
I think the biggest thing will be in preparation and getting those guys ready for the game. We saw what they did in Maui with taking care of their bodies and eating at certain times and doing it a certain way, like he's been there before. He knows how to handle these guys and how to have them ready the night before the game, day before the game, what they're going to do, exactly how he wants it. He's got everything mapped out so those guys know what they're getting into when they get there.
You know, I think the attitude is different between the fans who are not that confident and the players who continue to be confident. And I think there's a definite feeling there that they've separated themselves from all the negatives, and I think that Gross has helped them do that. I think that the whole staff, not just Gross, but the entire staff, they've made it a point to be positive in the worst of situations. That's hard to do.
And as quick as we can, do the Illini win on Friday?
I say yes, in a 6-point game.
I say yes in a closer game, 3 points.
Well, they're 2-point favorites, so I'll go with the favorites.
Don't bet against Vegas, right? There you go. Well, if they do, they probably earn a date with Miami. Should be a fun tournament to watch. Well, that does it for us here on Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason. Second round action picks up tomorrow, and don't forget the Illini tip-off against Colorado, 3:40 Central Time Friday. From sunny Austin, Texas, be sure to check out the coverage. We'll leave you with some of the big moments from the 2012-2013 season.
Inside the Illini Road to the Postseason is brought to you by Dick Van Dyke Appliance World and by Bob Brady Auto Mall.